For more on this, I'm now joined by Sener Akturk. He's here in the studio. He's a senior fellow at TRT World Research Centre. Sener, good to have you on the show. Now, one of the common themes that's been sort of coming out is that this is not just a non-state actor attempting a coup on a Friday night trying to take over the country. It runs much deeper. It's a much more complex operation. It's a much more complex organization. How deep had this group infiltrated Turkish society, Turkish politics?
Gülenists' origins go back to the 1970s. It's a product of the Cold War. In fact, it's a quintessential Cold Warrior type of clandestine organization that served certain purposes in the 70s, especially inculcated, nurtured by the 1980 military dictatorship. The first time the Gülenists were caught stealing the military academy entrance examinations, as it has been very much publicized now, is in 1986. Exactly 30 years before the failed coup. So we can go from there and say that it has been at least 30 years since 1986 that the Gülenist takeover of the military academies have been going on. A similar process was certainly underway and much more publicized with regards to the police and to a certain extent the judiciary and the universities at large. Many university entrance examinations and public servant examinations, known with the acronym KPSS in Turkish, were known to be stolen. At the time, it wasn't known or publicized that this was the work of Gülenists. That came much later in the last 5-6 years. It became more public knowledge. But in that sense, it goes back to the 1980s. Gülen was one of the founding members of the anti-communism chapter, the second anti-communism chapter in Turkey, in his hometown of Erzurum. The organization very much from the beginning positioned itself as ardently anti-Soviet, anti-Russian, and later on, after the Iranian Revolution, anti-Iranian. It, in its international publicity for sure, it had a very pro-American and pro-NATO posture, even when pro-American and pro-NATO interests conflicted with the Turkish priorities, as those became apparent with the Syrian crisis and many other crises in the Middle East and in the near abroad later on. So in a sense, we can say it goes back 30, 40 years. But what was its appeal? I mean, what was its recruitment rationale? And that is more about domestic politics, because for a very long time, public expressions of Islamic religiosity in Turkey were criminalized. From, for women wearing a headscarf to men, having beards or praying, going to Friday prayers, or certainly performing daily prayers and so on and so forth, especially for the high echelons of the military, the judiciary, and the high bureaucracy. And Gülenists exploited this very well because they basically and this is the same with any illegal organization. PKK exploited the criminalization of Kurdish identity during the military coup of 1980s in particular, and the Gülenists exploited the criminalization of Islamic religiosity, and they basically recruited their members saying that the only way to infiltrate the military, the police, and the judiciary is to be in hiding. An extreme version of public dissimulation. Nobody knows in the cellular structure as an underground vanguard party structure, basically. Although it's a millennial messianic religious cult, it adopted more or less an underground vanguard party type of cellular organization. In public, overwhelming majority of them, as it became apparent to many of us, were unknown as Gülenists. You would not know.
Let's just put a pause on that and actually just remind our viewers what we're watching. These are live pictures from Turkey's capital. We had just heard President Erdogan speak at the opening ceremony of Ankara's new police headquarters, which had been bombed, attacked by the coup plotters on July the 15th, 2016, 3 years ago. This is the ribbon-cutting ceremony where President Erdogan, along with other high distinguished officials, are shoulder to shoulder, ready to cut that blue ribbon, inaugurating the opening of this new building. Let's take a listen in just for a second.
İl Emniyet Müdürlüğümüz tüm milletimize, emniyet teşkilatımıza hayırlı olsun diyoruz. Ya Allah, Bismillah.
President Erdogan there inaugurating Ankara's new police headquarters as Turkey marks the 3rd anniversary of the attempted coup. All right, let's come back to Sener Akturk. We're just having this conversation. Now, you started off answering the first question with regards to the FETO organization having its roots to the Cold War. Then I have to ask you, the two main players in this is Russia and the United States. How much did the United States know about this?
The public knowledge already indicates that it knew quite a lot. Gülen's application for permanent residence status in the United States is well known to be endorsed, sponsored by at least 2 former Central Intelligence Agency officials.
As well as, I believe, Turkey's former, or the former U.S. ambassador.
Former U.S. ambassador and a very long list of distinguished American public servants. But even within the United States, it's part of a tug of war because on the one hand, a Central Intelligence Agency appears as one of the players that sponsored and endorsed it along the way, whereas Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, has investigations against Gülenist organizations for financial fraud and other, embezzlement type of crimes as these relate to the siphoning of public funds, to the charter schools, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't say necessarily that even within the United States government there is a singular unified opinion vis-a-vis the Gülenist organization.
Just hold on a second there, because these are some quite colorful pictures. These are from London, where there is a public gathering where people are performing a commemorational act as Turkey marks the 3rd anniversary of this failed coup. All right, let's. Do we have any audio on this? This is supposed to be a flash mob. Looking at the program, Sener, we know that one was going to take place in Istanbul. There was also a planned flash mob in. All right, so we also have pictures from Istanbul. There we go. We try to pick out the location if they give us a wider angle. All right, this is right in front of the historic Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia, once the world's largest church, then converted into a mosque after the conquering of then Constantinople, Istanbul in 1453. I believe this is in between, the square between Hagia Sophia and the Blue Mosque. So 2 events happening at the same time, one happening in Istanbul, in the historical city, and the other one happening in London. All right, let's go back to, all right, let's bring in live pictures again from London. We're watching a flash mob. A public gathering is about to perform a commemorational act. People of all sexes, all races, of all ages, as we can see, on the banks of the River Thames by the Tower Bridge. All right. Let's bring back in Sener, as you were talking about sort of its links to the United States. Sorry, I had to cut you off there for a second.
No problem. There have been many reports, one famous published in the New Yorker, Turkey's 30-year coup, where it has already been indicated that the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, used the Gülenist coups in Central Asia in particular as a cover for some of its employees. And a similar story is usually flouted vis-a-vis the Gülenist coups in Sub-Saharan Africa in particular. Because in a sense, Gülenism, although it has this more clandestine, messianic, millennial religious cult structure inside. In public, it marketed itself, still markets itself, as the moderate, pro-Western, pro-market, definitely pro-capitalist, pro-NATO, pro-American, when the opportunity avails itself, pro-Israel form of Islam, a new Islam. And in that sense, there's a big market for that, of course, especially after 9/11, but also during the Cold War, especially after the Iranian Revolution. But even before that, the United States and also some other Western powers looked for some kind of Islam, a version of Islam that could be used both against the Soviet Union, then against, Iran, and also within Turkey against, for example, the National Outlook movement, Milli Görüş, right? A form of very statist, actually, Islam, because contrary to the, again, contrary to its public relations campaign, Gülenism was very top-down and not bottom-up. It's an elitist movement. It's extremely over-concentrated in the higher echelons of non-elected components of government, the military, the bureaucracy, the judiciary, and so on and so forth.
Would it be fair to say that once, or Fetullah Gülen is out of the picture, the organization will have lost all of its influence? Since you said it was something top-down.
Yes, I didn't mean top-down in the sense of its charismatic structure, although that's also true, a one-man show type of structure. I meant top-down in the sense that it wasn't a societal movement that infiltrated the state, but rather the opposite. It was allowed from the top, from the military leaders of 1980s, CIA and other intelligence agencies who supported.
To what we saw sort of like in Iran in 1979.
Yes, okay. It's quite the opposite in that sense. It's the type of clandestine Islamic organization that the state authorities, whether it's the 1980 military dictatorship or the United States abroad, allowed. It was the good Islam that was being produced and propagated. Right. It is remarkable that, for example, unlike many other Islamic leaders and leftist leaders, Gülen wasn't arrested, imprisoned, let alone, had harsher punishment during the military dictatorships. And he supported all of them quite openly in his journals. He applauded the 1980 military takeover, as he clearly was, in this case, the mastermind, and the 1997, what we call in Turkish, the postmodern coup of 1997. So he has never been against any military coup, and in this case, the mastermind of the last and
certainly a very, very complex, and you're just saying this is just one domino in a much larger scheme. Yes. Sener, thank you very much. I do appreciate your analysis, and I know that you're going to have you on a little bit later on in the day throughout our continuing coverage as Turkey marks the 3rd anniversary of this attempted coup. We're going to get more insight from you, but thank you for now.